Hi, my name is Kirk Hamilton, your host of the Staying Healthy Today show. This is a show where we bring you key experts in nutrition, prevention, integrative and lifestyle medicine for the individual, for the society, and the world. And today I'm very excited to be talking to someone across the world in Denmark, and that's Dr. Signe Clemmensen. And we're going to talk about a very interesting article that came, I don't know, just crossed my path. Tattoo ink exposure is associated with lymphoma and skin cancers, a Danish twin study. And that was in is it the British Medical BMC
No, BMC Public Health.
BMC Public Health
Yes.
in January of 2025. And so I'd like to talk about it because the reason is you know tattoo parlors are ubiquitous around the United States anyway. And I never really thought about it. I mean, I don't personally have a tattoo and I don't I don't want to, but from getting a little tattoo, on your foot to having your whole head and neck tattooed. And in our business, we worry about environmental exposure of a variety of things,
Yes.
but that tends to be a self-induced environmental exposure. So welcome and thank you for coming on the show today. I'm going to ask you a few, you can enlighten me.
Yes. Thank you
So
very much for having me, and I've been
yeah,
looking forward to this interview.
good. So tell me about your educational, just basic educational background and current position and what you're doing.
Yes. Well, I actually have a master's degree in mathematics, but then I moved on to study statistics, and I have a PhD in public health. And during my PhD, I looked into various kinds of twin studies, looking at hematologic malignancies, and also tattoos as a potential risk factor for lymphoma, for instance, which is a hematologic malignancy. And I finished my PhD just last year in public health, as I mentioned, and now I'm employed as an assistant professor in biostatistics at the University of Southern Denmark.
So why did you decide to do a tattoo study versus some other risk factor for cancer?
It was actually a bit coincidental at first. Even before I started my PhD, someone mentioned to me, do you know that tattoo ink, besides from being in the skin, is also accumulated in the lymph nodes? And I didn't know that. I thought that was really interesting. And I started looking into it. And I realized there was next to no information on, well, long-term health consequences of tattooing. For instance, could it cause cancer? And I thought that was really interesting to look at. And also several of the larger health organizations like the European Commission and the International Agency for Cancer called for such studies. And I thought, well, I have an opportunity to study it now since I was employed with the Danish Twin Register. So I thought, let's do that.
Sounds great. Like, so twin studies.
Mhm.
Why did you do, I mean, I think I know why, but how about you tell us, the audience, why you do twin studies or why did you choose a twin study?
Mhm. So generally, there are two advantages of twin study. One is actually we just studied tattooing in itself also. We can use twin studies to look into what the causes are or the determinants of becoming tattooed. So is it something genetically determined or is it environmental or a combination of both? And we actually did a study where we found that um, the risk, if you can say that, or the probability of being tattooed is nearly twice as high at all ages if one has a tattooed co-twin. It means that there is definitely some shared component uh, translated into having a sibling or maybe even another family member with a tattoo, then you are also more likely to have a tattoo. Um, and
Wait
then
a minute, let
the
me
yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
and then the other way to use twin studies is in something called a case control design. And when it's twins, we call it a case-cotwin design. So we have a case with some kind of disease or whole group of cases, and then we select controls to be people that are as identical to these cases as possible, but without having whichever disease we're looking at. So in this case, it was cancer, different types of cancer. And then we look back in time and see, okay, were they exposed to tattooing in our case?
So in this study, did a group of the twins not have tattoos that you were comparing to those who had tattoos?
Actually, even within a case control study design, we have two different approaches to study this from a statistical point of view. So one is that we just look at the case group overall and the control group overall, so with and without cancer. And then we study basically, do those with cancer have, do they have more tattoos, or do more of those that develop cancer have tattoos?
Okay.
And then the other way around, where we can utilize the similarity within twin pairs. I mean, twins not only share birthday and their upbringing, they also share either half or all of their genes. And we can use that in something called a matched analysis. So instead of just looking at these case and control groups overall, we look at each twin pair and then we see, okay, the twin that has cancer, is that also the one that had the tattoo, or is it the other way around?
All right. Well, I can't wait to hear the results of that. So, first of all, let's do the twins first.
Yes.
Did the twins that did not have tattoos have less cancer and lymphoma? Can you tell
Yes,
that?
I was just trying to. I needed to turn this right around. So those that had tattoos, yes, they had a larger risk of developing cancer.
Okay. Any specific types of cancer?
Yes, we'll actually attempted to look at several different kinds of cancer, and in Denmark we have the nationwide cancer registers, so we have information on who has cancer and when, dating back to, is it 1940s, I think, so quite a long time, and we only looked at those that were 20 to 60 years old, and then we actually identified all Danish twin pairs where at least one twin in the pair had either skin cancer or lymphoma, obviously because that's where the ink is found. And then also from either hypothesis or from animal studies, we know that the tattooing can be distributed through the bloodstream to bladder, liver, and kidneys, for instance. So we also included those. But even though we invited all Danish twins to participate in this survey to get information on their tattoos, we couldn't study these last three cancers. So what we have looked at is skin cancer and it's lymphoma. And what we find is that when we look at just tattooing overall, having a tattoo or not, no matter the size, color, or anything, then the hazard ratio, then the hazard of skin cancer is 60% higher for those that have a tattoo compared to those that do not. And this is a study.
Twins, correct? We're talking about twins right now, or overall?
All of the study is twins, but this is not the matched
Okay.
analysis. So it means that we're not studying the twin pairs specifically.
Okay.
But this is just the overall one. And so there the hazard is about 60% higher. And if we then split tattoos into large or small, depending on whether it's larger or smaller than the size of one's hand, we actually see that the hazard of developing skin cancer is 2.4 times higher among those with a large tattoo compared to those that didn't have a tattoo at all. So it seems like there is something related to the size here, but we couldn't get any more specific than that.
Right. So that brings up all kinds of thoughts of not being judgmental on a group, but if you see someone with tattoos all over their body, let's say, prisoners, many times you see pictures of prisoners and they have large body mass of tattoos. Could that affect not just inflammation and risk of cancers, but behavior? Did you ever?
A short answer is I have no idea. And I haven't seen any studies looking into this. I mean, it's true that there are, at least until recently, very specific groups of people that had tattoos. But I haven't seen any studies that, indicating that tattooing would affect their behavior.
Well, since tattoos are so popular, we could do it this way. Let's say you had a sister that was 12 years old and she's thinking about getting a tattoo and you're advising her.
Yes.
Well, that's the best way I can look at this.
Well,
what would you advise?
that depends. Since it's my own sister, I would definitely tell her no, because I've been looking into this for quite a while. And
Right.
as a researcher, I'm concerned. So I would not personally recommend someone to get a tattoo. However, if I'm seeing this from a scientific point of view, with the information we have now, I think in total there are 5 studies published now that look into tattooing and cancer. And only 2 of them, our study and a Swedish one from 2023, find associations, suggesting that there is an increased risk of cancer, or that's lymphoma, and in our study also skin cancer, among those that have tattoos. But what we don't know yet is how much bigger is this risk? I mean, what is the magnitude of this effect? So we need to study further to be able to say if it's really something we should be worried about. I mean, is it more dangerous? It can be difficult to compare, but is it more dangerous than smoking or alcohol or lack of physical activity, for instance?
No, I get
So
it.
long story short, if a person asked me as a researcher, should I get a tattoo? I would say it's up to you, but it's very important to know actually how little we know about the long-term health effects of tattooing. So if someone thinks that can be dangerous, we would have found out by now. I would say no, because it's really, really difficult to find the causes of cancer, of lymphoma, for instance.
So let's maybe this is not in the discussion, but aside from a personal health,
Hmm.
if a mother has tattoos, is there any study or work on outcome of, I don't know, childbirth and effects on childbirth? Because obviously whatever's going around in the mother's going around in the child.
That's a really interesting question. That's actually something that has been on our, should we say, to-do list for quite some time now, but we decided to go with the cancer study first. But it is
Right.
actually something we're planning to look up, to study in the coming years, both
Yeah.
in terms of fertility, for instance, and also the ink in the mother, could it affect the child? But
Right.
there are
So
no studies at all.
right. And obviously timing of the tattoo. I mean, you don't do anything different during pregnancy. That's the golden rule, you
Mm,
try not to, drugs or whatever, but um
yeah.
yeah.
And I think also in
Any
Denmark, at least, it's not recommended that pregnant people or pregnant women get a tattoo. But still, it's not illegal. It's just not recommended.
right. No, I understand. I understand. Um were there any immune parameters or uh, nutritional assessment? For example, let's say vitamin D levels taken.
Hmm.
Compared to if you had adequate vitamin D levels above 30 nanograms, and ideally for me above 50, would that maybe reduce the risk to skin cancers and tattooing people? Because if people are going to do it, you'd like to be able to say, well, this might help minimize your risk.
Yeah,
Sun exposure would be another one.
absolutely. And that's two things actually. So first of all, in our study, we see an association that there is an increased risk of skin cancer, or more specifically, increased hazard um, of skin cancer among those with tattoos. But what we don't have in our study is information on sun exposure. So that could be an explanation, at least for part of what we see in our results. Because let's say that people with tattoos, now I'm just generalizing, but let's say that people with tattoos tend to spend more time in the sun, perhaps showing off their tattoos. Or it could be the other way around, that they want to protect them and avoid that the colors fade, so they spend less time in the sun. But at least tattoos spend a different amount of time in the sun compared to those without tattoos. Then they would have a different risk of skin cancer, but that would not be because of the tattoos itself, it would be because of the sun exposure. So that's one thing we haven't control for in our study because we simply didn't have the information, but we definitely need to do that in future studies.
So if you do it, do me a favor,
Mhm.
throw in one blood level, and that's a vitamin D level, because
Vitamin D
vitamin
level.
D enhances your, whole immunity,
Yeah,
and that could be protective against skin cancers. So there's a big debate, you know, sun
that's a
exposure
really
in
good
my
idea.
world. So if you get people who are sun exposed but they have low vitamin D levels, because a lot of people stay indoors all the time, then they go out and get burned,
Yeah,
which makes no sense to me. So if they had adequate vitamin D and maybe a light tan or something, that might be more protective. But vitamin D, if you do the study, throw vitamin D levels in there because it's universally helps so many different medical pathologies.
that's good to know. I think one
Um,
difficult part of this is that it will most likely be questionnaire based. I mean, a survey we send around
right.
through, we have this, what do you call it? Well, kind of an email that we can send out to specific Danes that are identified through these national health registers. So we know exactly who we invite to this survey. And there, it's not a blood sample. A blood sample isn't included. But if we do look at this more from a more biological point of view, which we also plan to do in the future, then vitamin D will definitely be
At least
something
if you
to
just had to pick
remember.
out one, vitamin D would be the
Yeah.
would be it, because then, well, so is there any, well, aside from not getting a tattoo, do you have any ideas of prevention? If somebody has tattoos,
Yeah. I think if you have a tattoo, I mean, then you already have it, right? What you can do is to, if you experience any symptoms either within the tattoo or symptoms of lymphoma, for instance, go see a doctor. And I know it's very easy to say for me in Denmark, for instance, because we can just go to a doctor anytime we want and it will be free of charge. But still, if you experience anything suspicious, then go see a doctor because it can develop into something quite severe. It's rare among tattooed people, just adverse side effects in general, but if it happens, it can really be something that causes pain for years. And for those that do not have a tattoo yet, or at least considers getting one, those that consider getting a tattoo, what they should be aware of is, well, from a scientific point of view, how little we know about the side effects, long-term health effects. So if they want to make an informed choice, that's very difficult right now. But also if they decide to get a tattoo, then make sure to choose the tattoo artist very carefully. Choose someone who knows about hygiene and also someone who knows about the content of the tattooing they use. Not just what it says on the label, but make sure that they use um, first-class manufacturers, because quite a lot of tattooing is known to have well, not even, we don't even know what's in the bottles because the labels on the bottle can be inaccurate.
right?
And also at least in Europe, we had new legislation about 3 years ago that limits the amount of carcinogenic substances in tattooing. And I don't think in the States you have that yet, but still be aware of the potential. I mean, make sure that the tattoo artist knows what he's doing. And if someone has known allergies, then make sure to avoid that, because nickel, for instance, it should be written on the bottle if it contains nickel. And obviously, if you have that allergy, you don't want it inside your body for life.
Yeah, that brings up a point. Any studies on heavy metals and tattooing in people?
Yes, I mean, yes and no. It's known that at least many of the inks that were used until recently contained heavy metals, various kinds, and also to rather well, large amounts actually. But it varies a lot from both from the colors and the manufacturers and so on. But it is known that heavy metals have been used in tattoo ink. But at least again in Europe, that has been banned, I think, or at least severely, or at least limited to a large extent in recent years. But
Any
actually, that
particular?
leads to sorry, yes.
Go, no, go ahead. I was just gonna
Okay,
say, any particular heavy metal that stands out?
I can't say many of them, but mercury, for instance. Um, but I think one important point I forgot to make before is that there have been, at least until recently, and probably still are some carcinogenic substances, so known carcinogens in tattooing. And by known carcinogens, I mean we don't have any human studies where people have had this ink or this compound injected under the skin and then followed to see if they develop cancer. When we say
Mhm.
known carcinogens, it's based on other studies like oral intake or inhalation or something like that, or even just like a lotion you put onto your skin. But if it's known or suspected to carcinogenic, it probably shouldn't be in something you inject into your skin. So one way to develop cancer is that simply because it contains carcinogenic substances. But actually, what we and others who are starting to look into, at least in particular developing lymphoma following tattooing, is that it's not so much the specific compounds in the tattooing, but it's more like a foreign substance in the body that creates this immune response or inflammation, which could, since the ink is staying there, could develop into a chronic immune response and thereby increasing the cell division. And when more cells divide, there's greater potential for something to go wrong and thereby increase the risk of cancer. So
So
it's not just the carcinogenic substances that could increase the risk of cancer. It's actually just having this foreign substance in your body.
yeah, that would be tough to determine. I mean, so you'd have to do blood work to even do something as simple as a C-reactive protein or some immune cells like interleukin-6 or something like that. I mean, or
Yeah,
T cells or whatever. That would be a much broader study. One
absolutely. We
thing that
need
you could do,
biological studies.
yeah. So one thing you could do with a survey though is it I mean, you could do something as simple as in the tattoo people that got cancers, what was their dietary survey of just fruits and vegetables? You know, I mean, in other
Okay.
words, just basic nutrition things that almost everybody agrees on. You eat more fruits and vegetables, you have a reduced risk, though there's debate on everything. But something like that, a dietary survey, or even whole foods. You know, how many processed foods you eat versus not to increase your, because I look at it as a load concept. I look at it as, you know, the ink is just one more load on the immune system. I mean, I don't, you know, I don't know if we'll ever find which ink is worse than another ink or whatever, but obviously it's one more load on the immune system
Yeah.
to have it there. And, you know, if you have a healthy body that detoxifies well, then you're going to have less chance. Because, for example, we measure heavy metals by doing challenges, and we see lots of metals come out when we give a EDTA challenge.
Mm.
And so that's why I was asking. I've been thinking, you know, somebody has a lot of tattoos, I do a challenge and see, but you don't know if it just comes from the tattoo. But I think lifestyle factors could be put into a survey and without the blood, you know. So, all right. Anything else that we haven't that you want to say about your study? Because you've done so, how long did the study take?
Actually, we sent out the survey to collect tattoo information in 2021, and then we only just published it now in 2025. So research takes time, but there was also maternity leave in between there. But it
Okay.
takes time, and what we have done here is a retrospective study. So we find those with cancer and then look back in time who had a tattoo and who didn't. And one potentially great limitation of this is that we're only able to invite those that are alive to participate in the survey. So if anyone died of cancer before 2021, then we don't have them in our survey. So alternatively, what one can do is a cohort study, a prospective cohort study, where we ask a group of people right now, do you have a tattoo? More information about them, of course, and then we follow them in the future to see who develops cancer. Then one downside to that design is then that, well, what about those that that gets tattoos in the meantime, because cancer can take 8 to 10 years to develop. So even that design is complicated, but it's a different way of doing it. The problem is that then we would have to ask people now. They have done that in France and Germany, I know, is setting up these prospective cohorts, but then they have to just sit there and wait for people to develop cancer, so to say. Doesn't sound very nice, right? But that's the way it is. So the alternative, what we can do here and now, are the case control studies, and that's what has been published so far.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about tattoos or cancer, your study that we haven't
No, just
elucidated?
in general, actually. I mean, in Denmark, we all know that tattoos have become more and more popular. And in Denmark, we actually estimate that around 1 in 3, if not more, 1 in 3 young adults have a tattoo. So it's very important that we know about the health effects, if there are any, and we know a lot about what can happen within the area of the tattoo, and because it's quite clear to see that the tattoo is a cause, but we really, really don't know much about what happens in the long run, and that's what we need to study now. So for researchers, it's important to know that we should study this further, and for those that consider getting a tattoo, it's important to know how little we know right now. So if they think, is this safe or not? The answer is we really don't know.
Well, I got to thank you. I mean, that was very interesting. You know, when I just was gleaning through the literature, that just caught my eye, and I go, that would be an interesting thing to talk about, you know, and to think about. It's one more risk factor on all. So I hope someday, if you do any biochemical markers, there's a vitamin D thrown in there, and there would be a simple dietary survey. I think that you know, whole foods and fruits and vegetables. I mean, that's pretty basic stuff,
I'll make
and
sure
that
to
could
note
mean a
that
lot,
down. Yeah,
you
thank
know.
you.
Okay, all right, Dr. Signe Clemmensen, thank you. How old's you took maternity leave? How old's your child?
My child is 3 years now. 3 years
3 years
old.
old. So right
Yeah.
in the middle of the study.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I
We
don't promise she
collected the
won't.
data, and then when I came back, I could start analyze them.
Yeah, I might guess that she probably doesn't have a tattoo.
Not yet, but she's very fond of those you can put onto your skin.
All right. So thank you so much, and you have a wonderful day, and
Thank you.
we'll be in
You
touch.
too. Absolutely. Thank you.